Thank you, Chair. Ready to go when you are.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me officially open this meeting. Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Councillor Katie Dye, and I'm chairing today's meeting. I'd like to clarify that while this meeting is being webcast live to enable public access, it's not being held as a public meeting in accordance with the Local Government Act 1972. And as such, it's a remote consultative meeting of the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee. The consultative status of today's meeting means that some of the usual formalities will not take place. Somebody needs to mute. That sounds a little bit better. And it also means that the committee will not be in a position to take any formal decisions. Where necessary, any proposed actions that do require formal ratification will be referred to the next formal public meeting of the committee for approval. So rather timely, can I please remind members to turn their microphones to mute when they're not speaking? And can you use the hand function to indicate that you'd like to speak as we move through the agenda? So I'm going to start by asking members to introduce themselves. So let's start with Councillor Anderson, please.
Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlin Wharfdale Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Blackburn.
Councillor David Blackburn, Farnley and Wortley Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Bowden.
Yes, Councillor Jordan Bowden, Roundhay Ward. And just thank you, Chair. I think you're the only person who's ever got my surname correct since being a councillor, which is great. Everyone always calls me Bowden, so it's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, that's a good start. Councillor Buckley.
Yes, Councillor Neil Buckley, Old Woodley Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Carlill.
Hello, Councillor Peter Carlill, Cavalier and Fardley Ward.
Thank you. Do we have Councillor Garthwaite with us? Don't think we do.
Not yet, Chair, no.
Okay, and Councillor Hartbrook we don't have, but we do have Councillor Downs.
Yeah, Councillor Rick Downs, Otley and Eden Ward.
Thank you. Is Councillor Hayden here?
No, Chair, not yet.
No, and we don't have Councillor Newton. Councillor Shazad?
Yeah, Councillor Mohammed Shazad from the Moortown and Meanwood Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Afternoon, Councillor Eleanor Thompson, Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
Thank you. Do we have Councillor Trustwell?
You do indeed, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Paul Trustwell, Councillor for Middleton and Belle Isle.
Thank you. Councillor Tudor?
Councillor John Tudor, Beck and Seacroft Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Wadsworth?
Councillor Paul Wadsworth, Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
Thank you. And Councillor Garthwaite?
Councillor Al Garthwaite, Headingley and Hyde Park Ward.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. So now can officers introduce themselves? So we start with Polly.
Hi, good afternoon. Polly Kirk. I'm the Chief Officer for Sustainable Energy and Air Quality at the Council.
Thank you. And Rachel?
Wainwright, and I'm Policy Officer for the Sustainable Energy and Air Quality team at the Council as well.
Thank you. And Cassie?
I'm Cassie Sivapalan. I'm the clerk to this committee.
Thank you. And Helen?
Hello, everyone. I'm Helen Graham from Governing Services.
Thank you very much. And now can I welcome guests who are going to be speaking to various reports. So officers we have present are Victoria.
Hello, everyone. Victoria Eaton, Director of Public Health.
Thank you. And John?
Good afternoon all. John Crowther, Chief Officer Resource and Strategy, deputising for Kath Roth, Director of Adult Social Care and Public Health.
Thank you very much. And I understand Fiona, who's going to be presenting our reports, is joining us later. So is there anybody I've forgotten?
Councillor Dyer, I have Andy Irvine, who's a public health colleague, on the call as well.
Oh, thank you. Welcome, Andy. Okay, so let's move to the agenda, and Cassie, can you record officially our apologies, please?
Yes. Councillor Newton sent his apologies ahead of the meeting. Councillor Hartbrook also sent his apologies, and Councillor Downs has come as his substitute.
Thank you very much. So moving on to item 2, declarations of interests. Any members have any interest they need to declare? Okay. In that case, let's move on to item 3, which is minutes from the last meeting. So I will go through page by page, and if you have any comments that you'd like to make, can you make them? So starting with page 5 in the pack. Page 6. Page 7. So can I just make a comment about the 2 people that came to our open forum last time? Both have received a response regarding the points that they made. Page 8. Page 9. And page 10. Okay, thank you very much. So those minutes have been approved. And we move on now to open forum. And unfortunately, we don't have anybody to address us today from the open forum. So I just wanted to make a shout out really that if you've got any groups or individuals that you work with, that we'd be more than happy to have them. I know we've had Climate Action Seacroft on before. It'd be a great opportunity for you to welcome people to talk to us about the work that they're doing in your local areas. So if you wouldn't mind having to think about that for the next meeting, I think that'd be something that we really ought to be picking up on. Okay, so in that case, let's move on to item 5, which is update from working groups. So we have 4 working groups, 3 of which have met since the last meeting. So shall we start with Councillor Carlill, if you're okay, for economy and finance?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I think I might ask Polly to add some details to the financial detail, because that would probably useful. So we met last week on a couple of items. First, we had an overview of where we're at nationally with green finance and the kind of ideas that are being explored. But the substantive item really was an insight into a pilot the council are part of with the Prime Minister's Business Council, working to try and realise that issue we've seen for some time, finance for private retrofits, so for people to improve their own houses. I might ask Polly, I'll note a couple of things that we raised as issues and had a discussion around, and then if Polly could just mention that, that'd be useful. But we had a real conversation around the difficulty finding suppliers for retrofit for individual houses, and getting balanced independent expert advice, which is a struggle. You know, where do you turn to if you would like to retrofit your own house? You may have some money to do, but you want to find out what will be valuable to do. That led on to some questions around communicating the benefits of individual measures. So how does a homeowner know whether solar panels will work for them, whether a heat pump will work for them, how much benefit insulation measures would have, and then really questions about how that finance comes. So yeah, if you then find something that works for your property, how do you get some finance for that, knowing that the benefits will come back year after year in reduced electricity and gas bills? I don't know if Polly wants to just touch on the specific pilot, which members found really interesting, actually, really positive to have a step forward in trying to work out this difficult problem of how do we deal with all these private houses that are in need of upgrade.
Okay, so we were approached in the summer by a number of companies, but including Lloyds Bank and Octopus Energy, and we've been working with them ever since to try and come up with a way to actually target the homeowner market, and working also with people like the Green Finance Institute and looking at longer term solutions like property linked finance, which in reality is probably won't happen in 2023, but there's a lot of pressure to try and find a way to actually resolve that so that people can invest in their properties beyond necessarily the period that they may own it for, so that things with longer paybacks can still be done. But ultimately, we are still kind of working through the detail of it, but going through financial modelling, looking at lighter touch measures that people can do on their homes, down to whole house retrofit, and looking at what the payback for those would be. And so ultimately there will be a report that comes out of that work within the next couple of weeks. So it's been done at quite a fast pace. And then hopefully in the new year we'll be in a position where we can actually start to work with our communities and talk through what we found and actually tweak it to make it something that's actually deliverable. So there's more details to sort of follow, I think, in the new year, but it's quite exciting to actually be working, you know, outside with other companies and getting other companies' advice, as well as just our own kind of work experience to date.
Thank you for that. So, Councillor Shazad, do you want to go next on Community and Business Engagement Working Group?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. We were told to keep our notes very brief to the committee, so I have got a brief set of notes. So apologies for that, because we were requested to keep it brief. We had Child Friendly Leeds attend our communities group, and Child Friendly Leeds gave the presentation, which was very good, especially since they've been around for 10 years. And obviously the Majesty of the King came down to celebrate 10 years of Child Friendly Leeds, which is something that we are doing really well. So we thought we won't change the wheel. We will try and get some advice and see how we could get the young children involved in the climate. In the climate emergency. And what we realised is Child Friendly Leeds, the children are very concerned about the climate change and what's going on in the climate. So now they've got they've actually rewritten the wishes, and now in the 12 wishes at number 5 comes the climate. So I will, just in case I get it wrong, I will read it out to you what the 5th wish is. The 5th wish is everyone takes more action to protect the environment from climate change. So as we can see, the children really feel that the climate change is something very important, something that we all need to take action on. So within that discussion, we found out that Leeds Child Friendly Leeds have an award ceremony where they actually celebrate their 12 wishes. And we're hoping as a group, the Climate Action Group, to actually link in with Child Friendly Leeds and promote the actual 5th wish, and actually promote the businesses and the Child Friendly ambassadors who are taking place, to make sure that we get our young children in Leeds thinking about the climate and how the ambassadors can also help them, and what can be done. So we're looking at making that award linked, providing it all goes ahead and the discussions are fruitful, to link that award with our board, the climate emergency. So that is one of the things that we are looking at doing. Then we're looking at, since they've got over 500 ambassadors, we're looking at maybe working with Child Friendly Leeds to see how we can in the future have ambassadors for the climate, and how that's going to that would help us to get the message out, because not everybody wants a message from councillors or from officers. So we would have businesses sending out, or local people sending out, who would be ambassadors for the climate, sending out the message that we need to work on the climate. And so that was a very fruitful discussion, and so we're hoping to pursue that further. So other than that, there was further discussions on how we could to the community committees. We could bring the climate agenda to the community committees, and especially to the youth summits. And I think that's something that everybody is looking at. So obviously it's a work in progress. We have all the stuff on democracy for the youth summit, and I think there's something that we need to look at, that we have something where we could either, whether it's quizzes, whether it's activities for children to do, or something just informal for them to have a discussion on the climate. So that would be something that could go out to all the 10 community committees, and then especially since we have a youth summit every year in all the community committees, there could be something where we could encourage young children, and obviously they bring their teachers with them as well from the school. So they'll be encouraging the schools to be taking an eye out on the climate. So it was one of those things that we discussed. So I will leave it at that, because I'm sure we had a lot more discussed at the meeting, but I was told to keep it very short and brief, so I'll keep it brief. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shazad. I really appreciate that. I thought it was an excellent discussion, and I think linking with the youth summits is something that is a really good piece of work going forwards. I know I visited 3 recently, and everyone, I think, if I remember rightly, one of the questions that's been asked by the young people has been about climate. So it really shows that it's at the top of their agenda. And I know there was a stall there at the last one that I was at that was consulting on the food strategy, but also sharing the I can't remember what it's called now, the web page. There's a climate, a youth climate web page. Polly might remember what it's called.
The Leeds by Example website, so it's a page on that.
Excellent, thank you. And anyway, there was a lot of interest from young people, so I think we're absolutely right to be moving in that direction. Right, thank you very much. So mine was infrastructure, planning and buildings, and actually there was quite a lot of crossover really between that and the discussions that were going on in economy and finance. Not surprisingly, really, we also talked about the Prime Minister's Business Council and the work on retrofit. We looked in more detail at the local plan update, and Martin gave us a snapshot of the work that's being done on that. We all know that that's out for consultation at the moment. I think that closes on the 19th of December, if I remember rightly. And then we looked at the energy reduction strategy work that your team's doing, Polly, and discussed some of the big hitters really, and the work that we can do around decarbonisation. And then we looked at the net zero housing plan and the update of that, which I think is going to exec board. Is that in the new year? That's going to exec board
in February as part of the overall climate update. It will go as part of that.
Super. Okay. Right. Thank you very much, everybody, for those. Thank you for your work on the working groups as well. It really is appreciated. And thank you to those of you who attend them regularly as well. Okay, so that moves us on to directors' update. So if you remember, we've invited all the directors on a rolling programme to come and talk to us about the work that their directorate is doing on climate change, so that we can be kept up to date and ask questions and move this work forward. So we've got Victoria today, and you've got John, and did you say Andy joining as well?
Yes, that's right, Chair. Do you want me to start and
yeah,
just introduce? Thank you, Councillor Dye. And thank you very much for the invitation to come along today and talk to you about what we're doing. It is a double act with John Crowther. So within the Adults and Health Directorate, we have got some slides, so I presume it's okay to put those up and run through them if that's helpful. So we worked on the basis, because we've got 10 minutes to talk with you around this. We'll do 5 minutes on public health, and then John will look at 5 minutes from adult social care, just to take you through the headlines of the work that we're doing around this. And obviously very happy to take any questions. So my colleague, I can see that the screen's changed. My colleague Andy Irvin in Public Health has been doing some work on coordinating this, the work on climate change within Public Health. So Andy's going to start, take you through, I think it's 5 slides just for 5 minutes, and then hand over to John to talk about adult social care. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
I'm assuming Andy's here on the call.
I am. I'm here.
Oh, hi,
I'm here.
Andy.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you.
It was lovely. Welcome. Thank you, everybody, for having us. Good afternoon. My name's Andy Irvin, Public Health Registrar, working the Public Health team. As Victoria says, just 5 slides, 5 minutes, just a quick overview. It's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the public health contribution to climate change. As Victoria says, I've been coordinating a piece of work around it. It sort of hinges around these 6 priorities.
A bit less quickly, please. You're
of course.
incredibly quickly. I can't keep up.
Sorry, I will slow it down. These are the 6 key priorities that the work hinges around. The first 4 of them, so around air quality, energy efficient housing, sustainable and healthy food, and active and safe transport, are mitigating actions, so ones that will reduce carbon emissions and have health benefits as well. The last 2, so adapting to extreme weather and responding to changing disease risks, are adaptations. So these are ones that are in response to the changing climate and the risks posed by that. And again, in order to promote and protect health associated with that. I'm just going to run through some of the key actions and activities within public health under each of those priority areas. So the first one here is around air quality. So public health have been put into the air quality strategy, and there are a number of key public health actions within that strategy. Foremost, really, I think, is the completion of a health needs assessment. So that will look at the data and evidence around air quality within the city, looking to identify the health impacts of poor air quality, and also the health inequalities associated with that, and make recommendations on how to tackle that. Other activities under air quality include things around raising awareness of the impact of poor air quality for health professionals. There was an event recently around that, bringing together health and care professionals from across the system to really highlight those health impacts. And other actions around air quality are around using air quality alerts and air quality alert system to communicate high pollution episodes to public and health and care professionals in order to enable behaviour change around that to reduce exposure. If we go to the next slide, please, John. Thank you. The next priority you're going to cover, this is one of the adaptations. So this is around planning around weather. So this is coordinated by the Weather and Health Impact Group, which is led by Public Health. And the aim of this is to have a sort of proactive approach to extreme weather conditions covering both winter and summer. So particular focus on vulnerable populations across the city. And the latest winter plan had 3 key priorities here around preventing infection and managing outbreaks, reducing the impact of cold, again, for the vulnerable populations, and supporting those living with frailty. The summer plan is more around the extreme heat events, and is around the actions there around messaging to mitigate the negative impacts, again, for the vulnerable populations, to embed a climate change perspective to that messaging, and also to work with the wider workforce around heatwave escalation processes, and ensure public are prepared for levels of hot weather and poor air quality. The last 4, I'll run through quickly just in the interests of time. So active travel, a lot of the public health activity around active travel is working with communities to identify barriers and facilitate a move to more active forms of travel. A key piece of work there is the successful bid for funding from the Department for Transport for a social prescribing project in Bermontofts, Richmond Hill and Hare Hills, with an aim of increasing walking and cycling in those communities. Moving on to the changing disease risks. So we know that with the changing climate, there is a risk that particularly communicable diseases will change. So part of that is managing outbreaks, which we do through the health protection team within the public health team in the council, but also working alongside colleagues in the UK Health Security Agency around communicable disease surveillance. So that's the monitoring of trends and patterns in communicable diseases, just to try and identify any important trends there. The third one on this slide is around sustainable food systems. So public health have been involved in the new food strategy, which I believe is currently out for consultation. And obviously that has elements around health and well-being and also around sustainability. So links the sort of health and climate agendas around food there. There's also a broader role for public health in terms of promoting healthy and sustainable food, for example, through things like the Healthy Weight Declaration. And the last of the 6 priorities is around energy efficient housing. Obviously, lots of work going on across the council. The public health role in this is around the commissioning of the Home Plus scheme. So this is a service for the more vulnerable households again, and provides support around affordable warmth, fuel poverty, and some energy efficiency measures as well. So apologies, that is a whistle-stop tour in 5 minutes of various different actions under those 6 priorities. There is a bit, as I say, we've been doing a bit of work behind the scenes, so there is more to go with this if it would be helpful in the future. But at that point, I'll hand over to John.
Excuse me. Thanks, Andy. Afternoon all, and also thanks for the invite. I think in terms of adult social care, we have five defined services, and I will go through these, which will be primarily a list as we've gone and collected things. I'm more than happy to come back if further analysis, explanation is needed on those. I think it's key to say that a number of these you may already have seen previously from other directorates, particularly around the building-based ones. But as we have a limited building use and we primarily purchase our care needs, I think it was worth including them here. The south and northwest homes, the care homes at Spring Gardens and North Manor, have had air source pumps fitted. Sorry, I'm just catching up with my notes and trying to read the slide, which is never a good thing, is it? Apologies. We also understand, though we haven't had it confirmed, that funding bids have been made to support additional work at the third care home, Dolphin Manor. The hubs at the east and the south, Knoll Manor and Spring Gardens care homes, have solar panels. We're shortly to have LED lighting fitted at 2 of our 3 care homes, Spring Gardens and Dolphin Manor. And the fit out to support the equipment service move, current site at Clarence Road to a recently purchased site at Waterside, has substantial sustainability work built into it, including capacity for, I think it's 25, I think 20 plus there, electric vehicle charging points. Which therefore leads us on to moving towards, where practicable, an electronic fleet for our equipment service. Within that equipment service, we do have a very high recycling rate. Last year's data, 92% of equipment that could be collected was collected, and 90.9% recycled, which was just under 22,000 items for last year. And I think, sorry, the other thing I forgot to mention is a lot of our changes, which have a benefit, are picking up, if I dare say, some of the positives that came out of COVID. Is that some of the work that we undertook and how we undertook that work, we've maintained. It's challenged some of our pre-COVID perceptions. And we do, where we think it's reasonable and safe and practical to do so, we will utilise phone calls for social work. And we've introduced talking points, which is a locality-based place where people can go and talk to social workers. Our neighbourhood teams are just that, co-located with LCH. And we also utilise area-based teams. Again, locality is a key through social care at the moment. Referencing their mental health and referencing LD, particularly around, particularly with some of our younger clients with a learning disability is the travel training program, which you may have heard from Children's, but really trying to get people with the confidence to use buses rather than have a taxi or a fleet vehicle pick them up, or walk as well. Within our commissioning area, sorry, that last set was a social work and social care. My headings are covered by the Zoom title, sorry. So within commissioning, this is where we purchase care for older people and working age adults, and it's also the lead area for working with our third sector partners. Our home care contracts are split on an area basis. We have inner, we have rural, and we have super rural, and that's to facilitate closer working in an area to reduce travel time, and where possible to encourage walking between visits. I will come on to an issue that we've got with that at the moment, but that is the way those contracts are set. Our providers of care homes are encouraged to think carbon neutral, and we've recently been in discussions with a new care home that claims has declared itself to be carbon neutral. And perhaps that's an area where we need to think how we can incentivize even that in future. And we're in the final stages of building a unit for 6 individuals, 6 bungalows. It is not a unit, sorry. 6 bungalows for individuals with very complex needs. One of those clients is currently a Leeds lad who's lived in a hospital setting for all his adult life. And we're bringing that person back into the city, and 5 individuals who are coming through transitioning from children to adults who would likely have gone out of the city will stay in the city. So that's better for them and their family, and social work in itself, and sustainable design principles built throughout. Resources, which is my area. We have the operational finance, complaints, workforce development, and performance. In terms of that, we've not done any financial assessments through a home visit for over 30 months now. That used to be the default. We thought that was the only way to do it. We've had quite good success, and therefore determined to stop. We're trying to move to electronic communication by default. We have a heck of a lot of paperwork because we deal with people's personal finance records, and we're rapidly moving away from that area. And we're collecting, where possible, as many email addresses to facilitate that. Our deputy and estates team, which are people who look after people's care, the finances where they've lost or haven't the capacity to do so. We've already applied to work with DWP so that we have online access, so we can share our data, which reduces the amount of mail that used to fly between the 2 organisations. And like many places, the team are primarily working from home and working quite successfully. So our training, workforce development, is almost entirely on Microsoft Teams. We still have to do some, particularly around handling. It has to be an in-person event. We have a We Care Academy that tries to encourage people to approach us who want a career in social care, not just with the council, but primarily outside of the council. And we try to locate them at a home or a care service close to where they live. And as the one there around complaints training, likewise, we're doing that on Teams rather than face-to-face, particularly as one of the prime national trainers is London-based. Our service transformation team is there to facilitate the change. And at the moment, much of what they are helping us with, you'll see on the other slide. So it may appear that there's not a great deal in there. But I think their key area of development at the moment is looking at digital and how digital can help us in reducing care visits, in reducing hospital admissions, and the way that we access information and display information for people to see. Our health partnerships are much more involved with the cross-sector of health and social care. And going back to 2019, they facilitated I've led even the development agreement of the Leeds Health and Care Climate Committee and Action Plan. I'll not go through those individuals because I'm sort of conscious of time running out and also talking quickly. But in the current year, they've done further discussions to ensure zero carbon at the forefront of NHS, third sector health and care partners, strategies and plans, and cross-organisational support. Probably a smaller one, but there used to be, I mean, as councillors, you probably used to drown in paper agendas, and that was probably the similar for us, and we've now basically removed printing from those services that we support. I do apologise that was quick, and I will try to work out how to remove the share. Oh gosh. If this was on Teams, I'd know exactly what I was doing. Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Was there anything you wanted to add, Victoria?
No, thank you, Chair. Happy to take comments and questions from the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So can we see hands raised if you have questions or comments that you'd like to make? Thank you very much. Right, shall we start with Councillor Tudor?
Thank you very much. It's just a quick question about the 6 individuals with the complex needs. I was just made me wonder. You said one was a Leeds lad, and so I wondered what that meant. Perhaps the scope of where these individuals are coming from, or whether that was just anecdotal. Or
apologies, I think. It's trying to draw strands together from lots of different work that happens in the Directorate. And one of the things that is a national agenda is transforming care. And that is to bring individuals back to their original communities, people who are in hospitals, secure units. And this is an individual who's been, so all of the individuals are Leeds people, but the other 5 are in Leeds, and we want to stop them going out of Leeds because of their complex needs. If that's enough, I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Councillor Trustwell?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As we got the benefit of the presence of our public health experts, I just wanted to ask about the latest position regarding COVID. Now, I know you might say, well, that's a public health issue relating to health, NHS, social care, or to the economy in terms of people not being able to function properly. But there is an environmental and a climate change element to it. And it's this, that our public transport services and bus services in particular are facing an absolute crisis. And one of the reasons why is that obviously patronage has plummeted to a very large extent because of COVID and fear of COVID. And I just wonder where we were in terms of hospitalizations and vaccinations and infections, because I know, and this is anecdotal, a lot of especially older people who used to live by their bus passes now only will use their cars because of the fear of COVID transmission on public transport.
I'm happy to pick that up, Chair, if that's helpful.
Yes, please.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Trustwell. So I think you're absolutely right. There's a connection of not just COVID, but all of our infectious diseases with this agenda. I mean, just before I answer your specific question, what's really interesting about all of this current pandemic, because we are still in it, and all of the recent ones, is that they've come from the natural world, the animal world, and jumped into humans. And there is a fairly strong body of evidence around loss of biodiversity in natural environments in terms of increasing risk of pandemics going forward. So, you know, there's a very fundamental connection there around this whole agenda, including biodiversity and future risk and management of pandemics. So that's a whole kind of context we're working in. In terms of current position on COVID, Councillor Trustwell, the current infection rates, thankfully, are relatively low. So we're down just below 2%, kind of nationally, regionally, and in Leeds at the moment, which is, you know, it's still with us very much. With the modelling that we're expecting to still see a wave of COVID, the latest thinking is that's now likely to be after Christmas rather than before Christmas, but there will be another wave of COVID. So at the moment, the rates, we're waiting for that wave, and the rates are still around 2%. Now, obviously, we know that our hospitals are still under an incredible amount of pressure, and what's happening at the moment is we've got very, very high acute respiratory infection, including flu, in the system. So all of the pressures we see, including the very specific pressures on children's services at the moment, are kind of there are multiple reasons for that, with backlogs and other issues from the pandemic, but there's also this wave of acute respiratory infection that we're managing. So thankfully, the COVID wave hasn't coincided with this flu wave, which is the good news, but it is still to come. So there'll be this prolonged period of pressure. The numbers of people in hospital with COVID is an improved position on what we were seeing 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. I think the latest figures I saw were just under 100 people who were COVID positive in hospital, although obviously the hospital is very proactive at testing people once they're in. So, you know, sometimes the more you find, the better, because then you can manage it. So that's slightly up on the week before, but still nowhere near where we've been. And ICU numbers are incredibly low for COVID still, thankfully. Vaccination rates are interesting. So what seems to be happening with both COVID and flu vaccinations in terms of headlines is both nationally and in Leeds, we are seeing really good uptake of those people who are most at risk of both COVID and flu. So care home residents and older people over 75s, over 65s have very high levels of vaccination, around 81%, 82% in those two groups. So that's good. What we are facing is a drop off of some of the other groups who are at risk, who aren't taking up the vaccines as much as we'd hope. So we're around 40% of the people who are younger than 65, but they've got a clinical reason to have a vaccination, and the uptake is just around 40% for that group. So that, you know, there's a lot of work to be done on advising and supporting people, that there's still a need to come forward, and that's still something that would benefit them. Again, pregnant women are another group that's lower than it should be. The uptake rates are about 21% for pregnant women. So it's very mixed. So again, in those older groups, we're still doing really well, but there is an element of vaccine complacency that's coming this year. So and it sort of works both ways with the flu and the COVID. So either people are getting flu and not getting COVID, or the other way around. It's sort of playing both ways. But yeah, that's where we're at. I hope that's helpful.
It is indeed. Thanks very much, Victor.
Thank you. Councillor Bowden's next.
Hi, yeah, this is a question for Andy. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on the active travel within the Hare Hills and Bermondsey and Richmond Hill and the social prescribing. Yeah, could you just elaborate a little bit more and just tell me what the what the scheme actually involved?
Of course, yeah, happy to. It's not something I've been involved directly with myself. It's something our colleagues led. Obviously, social prescribing is where is used in situations where often healthcare professionals will identify a need, a health or well-being need that is not necessarily a biomedical problem. It's not something that we need medication for. So social prescribing gives that other side of things. It gives that route into the more social side of things. So this will be available for GPs and other healthcare professionals and other parts of the system to refer into. And the aim really is there was a big discovery piece of work in those communities that identified a number of barriers to active travel and physical activity, and this is then aiming to bridge that gap. So to give people which often wasn't necessarily the infrastructure and things that we would ordinarily think of as barriers. It was actually things like safety, the environment in which people were able to undertake that physical activity. So this is very much to try and link into with social prescribing to give those people in those communities opportunities to have access to walking, cycling, and tackle some of those community barriers around it. I hope that answers. I don't know whether Victoria's got anything else to add on that bit at all.
Well, only briefly to say, it is a small amount of short-term money that is coming to us to do something on a relatively small scale to test out whether this is something that works on a bigger footprint, because we know this isn't the only part of the city that would benefit from that approach. But it's a pilot programme with national government just to try things out with local communities. So it's a short-term piece of work which will be evaluated, and then we want to learn from that and see what we can do in other parts of the city. We're happy to send you some more information on that, Councillor, if that's helpful. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to pick up on what Councillor Trustwell said, and then Victoria's comments, if I may. He was right to bring in this question of the a certain proportion of older people not going back onto public transport. And if we all cast our minds back 2 years or more, the government spent millions of pounds telling just those people that you must not, under any circumstances, go on the bus because you will be in big trouble if you do. And guess what? They believed it, and they didn't. And I think some people thought, well, in 3 or 4 months' time, when this is all over, we'll just tell them it's safe again, and they'll all come back. Well, they don't, because they don't listen to that. They're still frightened because of the original message. And I would just say, just picking up Victoria's comment on that, the cases are down, the very urgent cases are hardly there at all. And yet here we are talking about it. And so it's no wonder that a certain cohort still think it's not safe. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Was that a comment, or did you want a response to that?
It was a comment, really, Katie, but if anybody wants to comment, I'm happy with that.
I think Victoria's got her hand up, so would you like to answer?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to briefly comment, and yeah, I think to pick up the point about confidence on public transport, I guess I'd just agree with the job to do around rebuilding public confidence after they've had very strong messaging through the pandemic around risk. So this whole chapter that we're now in now of living with COVID, we know that there are lots of people of all different ages and in circumstances who are choosing not to go back to maybe getting the bus or being in a crowded environment or whatever. So I think it's absolutely right. The points we do need to support people to go back to balance that risk and to take actions in their everyday life, which does reflect the risk that if people are vaccinated and protected, there's much more of a risk to people's health on being isolated and lonely and not engaging than there is in coming together. Now that's different, I accept, than people choosing to drive over getting the bus. But as you say, directly links to the agenda of how we do build up that public confidence in order to, for most people, and there's a range of confidence down there. Some people will need a lot of support to make that happen, particularly if they're still quite clinically vulnerable. But I suppose really, Chair, just to support the point really that there is still a job to do. We can't just turn off the messaging and expect people to bounce back into the world because of the impact it's had on everybody. So I think I welcome the comments from councillors, and I think that we will need to continue to build that confidence. As we link these agendas together in the future, because it's very, very likely, as I've just described, that we'll be living with kind of low levels of various infectious diseases, and some new ones that will come. We'll have to live with this in the longer term. So just that sense of proportionate risk and supporting people to go about their lives and balance that risk in a way that's right for them is very important. So just to assure councillors that it is something that we do acknowledge and need to put time into that messaging and narrative around. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Victoria, for Andy, or for John? Can I just quickly finish with two from myself then, please? And I think they're relating to some of the comments you made, John. The first one was, you said we're looking to increase our EV fleet, and you said where practicable. So I just wondered where it would be and where it might not be.
Thanks, Chair. I think where I say practicable is because I understand, and I'm going to caveat all this by saying my background is as an accountant. I understand that certain vehicles, heavy lifting vehicles, are not yet EV-able. That's where I'm saying practicable. If we can get a full fleet that does everything we need to do, lifting beds, manoeuvring beds, all of those things can be done on electric vehicles, then that's where we will go. I was just trying not to mislead where I thought that some of our vehicles might not be able to be purchased as electric vehicles.
Okay, thank you. No, that's an interesting comment, because as far as I understand, I have a feeling we are trialling a bin lorry. So I don't know whether it's actually in service. Don't know if anybody on the call knows.
We're just going through the procurement process for that. But John is right that there are certain vehicle types where they're more specialists that aren't readily available in electric yet. So refuse vehicles is one that's started to be developed, and local authorities are starting to take up, and private sector companies as well. But not our whole fleet yet. So. Okay,
thank you for that clarification. I was just interested in where we might go in the future. I would imagine that research is going to be being done, isn't it, into more specialist vehicles as time rolls on. Okay, and then a last quick one from me. You mentioned quite a bit of decarbonisation work around buildings, and I wondered, where does that leave us? Is there still a lot to be done?
In terms of the buildings that we have access to, so that's the wrong way to put it. The buildings that adult social care has access to are relatively low in number in terms of those that are directly ours. All of our building stock is effectively managed by asset management. So I think I tried to cover that at the beginning, that you may hear some of those things. So our care homes, there are 3. All of those 3 are being looked at. We have 3 hubs. 2 of them, I think, have been converted. One of them, I think there was an issue around either building type or strength of roof that affected it. And then we have a handful of day services. And I think, again, Polly will correct me if I'm wrong. I think that they were being looked at as in a funding round, but I'm not sure how far we got with that.
So I can't answer specifically on the adult social care portfolio. I think we've got something like 900 buildings across the estate, including things like changing pavilions, and so far we did 40 in the first round, and we're doing about another 10, and we've got funding in which hopefully we'll hear about in the next month or so, for probably about another 20, but that includes schools as well. So we're working through and we're trying to focus on those that are the biggest energy users. And we're also looking at further improvements on things like LED lighting within homes for older people, to make, so not just about LED, but actually when we're using lighting as well. So there's work going on that as well. So we tend to look at it as an overall council portfolio as opposed to by service.
Thank you for that. Okay, so if nobody else has any other questions, can I thank you, Victoria, Andy and John, for joining us and for all the work that you're doing. It's very much appreciated. Thank you, and you are welcome to leave if you'd like to.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us on to item number 7. So I think Fiona has joined us and is going to give us an update on the refresh of the inclusive growth strategy. And our remit really for today's meeting is to note where climate emergency work is embedded in this update, and make any comments. And I think it's going to then go out for consultation. I'm sure Fiona will be able to put some detail on that, but that's our remit, to note the contents and add any comments. So over to you, Fiona. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just try and share my screen and just whiz through this presentation. Just give me 1 second to make sure I can. Right, can everyone see that now? Yeah. Excellent, thank you very much.
I think you've frozen, Fiona. I don't know if you can hear us, but we can't hear you.
Fiona said that there were 2 other people joining her from economic development. So are either of those on the call and able to step in?
Hi, can you hear me at all now? Apologies, it's Marion Wi-Fi, I'm afraid. It's the bane of my life. I shall be reporting this one again, so I'll do my best, okay, to get through this. The wording on this isn't set in stone yet, so I'm going to try and whiz through this presentation so you can get a feel for what we're doing with this. So you can see this is our new logo. So for inclusive growth, this has been developed in-house. Just thought I'd show you that. We are refreshing the strategy. We're not starting from scratch, and we want to make sure we incorporate work that's been done over the past couple of years, such as obviously reflect the transport strategy, our future talent plan, which is the skills and talent plan for the city. And one of the things we want to acknowledge is the importance of the climate emergency. I think you can see from the strategy that was done earlier that wasn't anywhere near as strong. And I think this is one of the big shifts that we've seen over the past couple of years, is that acknowledgement of that climate needs to run through as a theme. It doesn't need to be a separate theme. It needs to come within all of the bits of the strategy from this. Before I kind of get into some of that, I just wanted to want us to sort of acknowledge there has been a lot of things that have been delivered on the previous strategy, and sometimes we don't look back enough and actually go, look at some of the good things. So just to pull 1 or 2 things out here, we think that we've got some really strong bits in Leeds. We've got the Leeds Anchors Network, which has been evolving and becoming stronger, and we're working through that to help achieve some of our net zero ambitions. We've got the South Bank. I think we've got a picture of the South Bank up there as well, and transforming the city centre and creating the city's newest green space. And also the full fibre connectivity. I wanted to call that one out as well, because I think that's hugely important. That's a £20 million partnership between the council and BT to get digital connectivity to schools, the public and NHS building and council housing as well. There's been so much that we have actually done under the banner of the old strategy that I think it is actually worth celebrating. I'm going to read quick on the next couple of slides, because these are just sort of a bit of a sort of picture of the economy at the moment. And you know, we can see from some of this, we've got, you know, quite a difficult challenge at the moment, but we've also got some positive things in the city as well. So in terms of the difficult challenges, we know where we are in terms of cost of living. We know how much, you know, this is difficult for the city. We know businesses are feeling the impacts of all of that at the moment. We need to make sure that we're reflecting some of this in our strategy going forward as well. But at the same time, we must look forward to 2030 as well. So the trick for us is to be able to talk about what's happening now and how we're helping people now, but also that longer term resilience in the economy as well. I mean, the new strategy will reflect both of those positions. Just give me a bit of a second. So yeah, excuse me. We've created quite a big evidence base over the past few years as well. So some of the things that are on here, this will all be, we'll be drawing on all of this as we're putting the new strategy together. So some bits and pieces that are up there, the future of our city and local centres, that work was done a couple of years ago. And I think there would be people on this panel who have heard of that and who have looked through that. And we certainly have taken that through scrutiny board. We've got a lot of work on innovation and the creation of the new innovation arc. And all of these are the strategies that are on here. We all need to make sure that we're reflecting what we're doing here. I wanted to talk about a piece of work that is just starting to report, and it's not one of ours, but it is being done by WICA, but I thought it would be of interest to the panel today. And we've just got some emerging, we're just getting emerging findings at the moment. WICA have been leading on some work around green skills and green economy. And some of the findings that they're coming out of this is around green jobs and what they're seeing. So some of the findings are they're seeing like this broad spectrum of occupations that are represented in the green economy, and they think many jobs are greening as the economy transitions towards net zero, and that trend isn't focused on particular sectors. They find that, I think they were saying that West Yorkshire's got nearly 100,000 jobs in carbon intensive sectors that they think we're going to need to change during the transition. So this is, you know, obviously quite a big transition, and that represents about just over 9% of employment in West Yorkshire. I think they think that in order to realise the potential of the green economy in West Yorkshire, they're working with stakeholders to try and develop some practical recommendations to deliver that positive labour market outcomes for West Yorkshire. And they think those recommendations are in three key areas. One is around strengthening sort of the West Yorkshire specialisms, and they pulled out in particular things like low carbon manufacture, retrofit and construction, and green finance. And for Leeds, green finance, actually, this is a real strength, we think. So we're going to be working with WICA to see if we can get much more in-depth information for Leeds over the next couple of months as well. The other two priorities, one is around delivering a just transition, and the other is around support and skills development and career promotion, and we're already linking in around that. I haven't got a lot more information at the moment, but I'd be happy to come back once we have a little bit more. So this is really, we've only had this in the last back end of last week. What I've put up here now is I wanted to show you how our big ideas are evolving. So in terms of the inclusive growth strategy, we previously had 3 pillars and 12 big ideas. And we're keeping those 3 headlines, which is about people, place and productivity. But what's changing underneath this, and I need to add that this is early stage, so the wording on some of this is likely to change. So like I say, you are seeing this as an early stage. This is what our evolution of those big ideas is starting to look like. So for instance, under people, tackling poverty and inequality to improve people's lives. We think that's where a lot of how we're responding to the cost of living crisis is going to sit in relation to people. Supporting people and businesses to thrive in a rapidly changing labour market, and aligning education and training to better meet local needs. That comes straight from sort of our future talent plan, so we're reflecting what's gone on there. And then under place, things like investing in our places to create a greener future, connecting and strengthening communities. All of this is just work in progress at the moment. And then in productivity, things like stimulating innovation and promoting leads and helping businesses. I would just wanted to show you one quick thing from which is quite live work, which is what we're working on at the moment. So this is a deeper look into what our thinking has been around place and some of the things we want to make sure that we're reflecting. So obviously we need to reflect the local plan. We need to reflect what we're talking about in terms of transport infrastructure, green infrastructure and energy efficiency. But that needs to run through the whole sort of our infrastructure that we're talking here. Low carbon energy, affordable housing. These are some of the things that we are really trying to bring to the fore in this pillar of the inclusive growth strategy. And then finally, just so you can see the timetable for what we're working on at the moment. So we're starting to draft some of this now. So this is our thinking. So it's a chance to influence over the next few months as well. And we're starting our stakeholder engagement. So for instance, we're going to the Chamber, the Angus Executive Group, Health and Wellbeing Board. We'll be talking to scrutiny committees, obviously, as well. And then we've got an inclusive growth partnership event to which everybody's invited. And if you want a direct link, if you haven't seen it, we'll send it round to SEAC members straight afterwards. This is going to be in the banqueting suite in January, and I'd really encourage people to come along, because that's your opportunity to hear more about this and to really influence, to see what we're doing and to influence what that comes next. And we will be publishing the new strategy in the summer of 2023. So I'm just going to pause that now and stop sharing and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for the invitation. I think it would be a good idea to send one round to us all. I would imagine a lot of people would like to attend if they're available. And thank you for the offer to share the slides as well. Okay, so Councillor Blackburn.
Thanks, Chair. I've got to say what's in the document seems to a lot of it seems to be worthwhile and something one could support, but I do find it rather strange that we are talking about growth at a climate change meeting, really, because you do not necessarily think growth is going to be helpful with dealing with climate change. A lot of the changes we're going to have to make will change the nature of employment and business and that, and there are a lot of jobs to be created in green economy. But that's got to be sustainable. And apart from one little box where you mentioned sustainable economic activity, it is about more. And quite honestly, a lot of people, certainly from my political background, do not believe we can do more. We probably need to do less.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Was that a comment? Did you want a response from Fiona on that?
She can come back and say how she's going to deal with that. Because as I said, that's the question really is how do you deal with economic growth to make sure it is sustainable and doesn't affect the climate?
Chair, could I just crave your indulgence and chip in, because my contribution would follow on quite nicely, and it would be a shame to ask the same question twice.
Why don't you do that then, and then we can go over to Fiona?
Okay, to amplify in a way what David's saying, and it's nothing to do with his political background in the Green Party. I think it's what we're all here collectively to do. Last week I was in a meeting, and I won't say what meeting, I won't say who was there, but a fairly senior person, I shall put it that way, said that we needed to build more houses in Leeds in order to generate more council tax, in order to buttress us to some extent against past austerity and continuing austerity. And I must admit that really made me recoil to a degree, because Fiona's made the point and David's amplified it, that things like inclusive growth and sustainable growth, which do interlink again, as has been said, should be the watchwords of what we do and not bolt-on extras. And it really does worry me, this idea that, people are still saying that we need to build more housing, because we've got to, we've got to collect people's waste, we've got to dispose of it, we've got to provide the sanitation, we've got to provide the water. We don't have the transport system that discourages them from then going on in these properties to use their cars, with all the impact that has on the wider environment, including climate change. So I think any opportunity we've got as members to amplify the fact that, and you've heard me bang on about this before, and I'm doing it again, that there is good growth and there is not so good growth. And I think that's one of the key challenges facing us. In terms of more specifics, I think what we need to see in due course is not just a recognition that there are green jobs, both in the digital sector and further afield in terms of energy conservation and retrofitting and energy supply. But what the actions are that not the council can take, because we are just catalysts in terms of partnerships, in terms of partners, but what is going to be done not only to develop these industries locally, but to ensure that local people are trained and ready for them. Because what we've tended to do as a city is create these kinds of jobs and then import people from outside and have to build more houses to house them, which is just not a sustainable approach. So it's what we're actually doing, what we are going to be doing in a practical way to not only promote these industries, but to train people up who are residents of our city at the moment to undertake these jobs. And one last point you'll be pleased to hear is in one of the tables that Fiona showed us, talks about making Leeds an attractive place to live and work, but also to visit. And I'm just wondering if, again, this is an example of somewhere where there needs to be a balance, because people visiting the city, especially internationally, are going to be doing so and creating quite a large carbon footprint while they do it individually and collectively. Thanks.
Thank you. So lots in those two comments. There were some questions in there as well, though, Fiona, if you could tease them out and provide an answer, please.
Oh, well, I'll do my best, but I say, so the growth degrowth thing is obviously, it is a live issue and it's being discussed everywhere. And I actually think there needs to be some space for that debate, and I'm very happy to do some of that. But, you know, I think some of this is political and I'm an official. So I'll kind of, you know, it's not that I don't have an opinion, but I do think that needs to be something that, you know, council members do talk about, and we can talk about that at the Inclusive Growth event. I'm happy for us to do that. I think we need to realize that, I know when people talk about, you know, economic growth, we actually haven't had an awful lot of economic growth for a very long time. If you have a look at the trend rate, where we have, it's been quite low for about, well, since 2008. And it's not, things aren't great at the moment, but what we need to think about is what kind of growth do we want, which is, you know, to echo what Councillor Truswell has said there. And I think there are, you know, what we don't want to have is large scale economic scarring. Like if we think back to the 1980s and you think of places in South Yorkshire, which, you know, or hear my accent, the Northeast, that wasn't pretty either. So we need to think about that just transition sort of side. And I think we need to think about what businesses need to actually change what they're doing. So what is the kind of support that we need to be able to put in place? Because actually there'll be some, you know, if we want the right kind of growth, we have to acknowledge that there'll be some things that people that are happening now that actually those sectors won't exist, you know, in a way as things move on. And I think that's the work that WICA are looking at, and I think that might be the right level to look at some of that actually, is at that West Yorkshire level. And we want to make sure that we can help support the kind of businesses and the kind of industries that are going to be here for a lot longer and will provide those kind of jobs for people, and linking in with our skills programs. So we're on with it. We're looking at some of this, but I mean, you know, not having sort of some growth in the right places, in the right kind of industries is not going to be pretty for the city either, I think. So, you know, happy for us to have the debate and for us to be guided by the political leadership on this.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions? Can I just Polly, we're going to come in. Yeah, you could come in first, Polly.
Fiona might want to come back in, but I think, Fiona, is it worth just mentioning about some of the work that's going on about the sort of sustainable side of sort of 2023 and the visitor income? I presented probably 2 weeks ago with the sort of hotel industry in Leeds, and actually it was quite impressive, some of the things that are starting to happen in that sector in terms of really addressing that and attracting sort of the right sort of tourism and visitor economy. Sorry, Fiona.
So I'm really sorry, Polly, I would love to, but I haven't got some of that to hand, but I'm very happy to get some facts and figures from Belinda and to circulate them afterwards, if that's okay. I
think it would be worthwhile because there is quite a lot going on that, so I think it's worth just kind of emphasising that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be really good to hear about. Thank you for that, Polly. Any questions or comments from anybody else? So can I just pick up on something that Councillor Trustwell mentioned, and Fiona, you discussed as well, about the kind of green jobs, green skills agenda. I know we've discussed before in meetings, matching up the kind of the skills that people are going to need with training that's available and with people who perhaps are going to need quite a lot of education in terms of the idea of moving towards a kind of green jobs economy. I think it's just a word for a lot of people. Have we got any plans to do anything like events, job fairs, promotions in colleges and schools, things like that?
I'll have to come back.
Oh, she's disappeared again.
Councillor Di, can I just come in then?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I know some of the things they've done. So they have done some sort of professional training with the careers advice across schools. So some of our supply chain partners have supported on that and gone in to talk about different green jobs and skills and opportunities. So sorry, Fiona, I came in because you froze. So just talking about some of the work that Martin's team has been doing on jobs and skills. We did a green jobs event with schools last year as well. And again, we brought in all different partners to talk. So there's been quite a lot going on, but there's also, I think, engagement from some of the colleges and things, starting to look at actually what does that future programme look like. I'll stop so Fiona can come back in.
No, that's absolutely fine, Polly. You've covered all of that off. There is a lot happening in this space, and the employment skills team are all over this at the we
and in fact we should.
Can I just say as well, if you have a look at our future talent plan, futuretalentleeds.com, we've got some education institutions signed up with pledges about what's ongoing in colleges and things. So have a look at that if you'd like to.
Thank you. That's really good to hear, because I think that fits in with so much of the other work that we talk about in terms of decarbonisation and Better Homes Hub, and a lot of the things that we're planning for a city need that, don't we? We're not going to go forwards unless we have those people able to do that work. So thank you for that. Does anybody have any more questions for Fiona? Okay, so we're staying with Fiona, but we're going to move on to a different topic now. And this is the Social Progress Index, which some of you may have seen before in different forums. Some people it might be absolutely brand new. And it's, well, to me, as a person who loves data, it's an absolutely fascinating piece of work. And Fiona is going to introduce it to us, and then I think our remit for this item is to comment on the environmental indicators specifically, and as we're listening to Fiona, to think about anything that we think could possibly be included as this rolls on. Is that correct, Fiona? Is that what you want to
say? Yeah, That's absolutely fine. So it's myself and Graham Ponton. So given the state of my connection in Marion, Graham's actually going to share his slides, and I'll start this off, and then I'm going to hand over to Graham. So this is really timely, actually. We're ready to put this onto the Inclusive Growth website, and we're planning to put all of this actually on and launch it live before Christmas. And just so everyone is aware, we've got a slot for all scrutiny members before Christmas to do a bit of training on this. So I know some of you will have that and have that in your diaries as well. So thanks for that. Thanks, Graham. I can see that slide really well. So can you just put the next slide on, please? That's fine. So we've been doing, we've actually been working on this for quite a while, but it's not gone live yet. We've been doing quite a lot of work, sort of consulting, talking to people and working with a small group of members. We've been taking it to a couple of people and showing them and helping us kind of work through some of the bugs on that. So you can actually see all of the groups that we've been, we've talked to about this, and we tried to reflect the feedback in the latest version of the Social Progress Index. So if you're all right to go to the next one, Graham, and I'll talk a little bit about what this is and where it's come from. So we've been challenged in particular sort of by the Inclusive Growth Scrutiny Board, and Councillor Truswell's been, obviously, been really helpful with this around, for us to really understand that the difference that we're making in places, and, place matters, and we have to be able to understand that impact if we're going to deliver inclusive growth. And this, so the Social Progress Index is our chosen way of doing this. There isn't one single way of measuring inclusive growth. There isn't one thing that we can point to say, are we growing the economy and not leaving people behind? There are lots of different models, lots of different approaches, and this is our chosen way. We think this gives us a clear framework, and it's built from the ward level upwards, so we can get a real deep look into the city, and it's something that's being used internationally. So it's you can get these at the country level. There are other cities across the world who've been using this, and there are also some thematic indices as well. And this helps us build us that understanding over time as well, because the data that we put in is we have to have it for 3 years to be able to make it into this. It helps us, with decision making and targeting activity and resources as well, if we want to do that. And it brings together data that is all social or environmental, and sits alongside sort of more traditional economic measures. So we bring it all together and to get a much more holistic view across the city. Next slide, please, Graham. So these are the design principles, and very briefly for background, this is what sits behind the work. It was created by the Social Progress Imperative, which is a global non-profit organisation, and we've been working with them. They came to us through some work we did in Boston as part of our participation through the MIT REAP programme. And what this index does is it measures outcomes of lived experience. So it's holistic and it's relevant to all communities, and it's focused on aspects that underpin thriving societies everywhere. And it's a practical tool, and it's actionable, and we can use this to drive change. And as I said, it sits alongside our economic and our demographic measures. Okay, in the UK, we know that the other local authority that have been using this probably most is Barking and Dagenham. They've been using it for about 3 years, but we know now that there are another couple of local authorities who are coming on board and who are working on this at the moment. I think Leeds is probably the biggest of the local authorities that have started to use this as well. But there have also been other indices. So there's also things like there's a youth index. I think that was in South Africa, and in London, Barts Hospital have produced. They've worked with them to produce a health index as well. So next slide. If I show you the main headlines, the main domains of the index, and what is sitting underneath the one in Leeds. So they come under, there are 3 key headings: basic human need, foundations of wellbeing, and opportunity. These are and then underneath that we have the headlines of what stays, and these are common to all the social progress indexes. So nutrition and basic medical care, access to basic knowledge, access to advanced education. What sits underneath that are the indicators that we've chosen. And this is where we've had 3 years information at the ward level, and the indicators must fit that criteria of being social or environmental and about outcomes. Now, we've worked with colleagues across the council to select these indicators, and we've given lots of consideration to the headline strategies that sit behind some of these and plans. So, for instance, health and wellbeing, children and young people, air quality. And then, so this is ours and what it looks like. And we completely acknowledge this is the first version that we've done, that there are an awful lot more indicators that we'd like to have, but we, at the moment, we don't necessarily have the data, but we actively want to make sure for the next version that there is more in this. And, there are various constraints around using certain indicators. So, for instance, we wanted air quality in there, but because of the way it's currently measured, we weren't able to get there. But we absolutely want to have that when we can land that in the next version. Graham, can you just put the next slide on, please? I'm going to just briefly show you some of the ones that we looked at but weren't able to include at this point. So you can see we've started from a big range of indicators, and then we've had to narrow some of it down depending on data and data quality. So these were some of the things that we actually did want to include but haven't been able to include at this point. Now I'm going to pause here and I'm going to hand over to Graham, who's just going to show you a couple of bits and pieces of what you'll see when you go onto the web and what it shows you. So if I'm going to stop there and hand over. Thanks, Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. Can everyone hear me okay? Is it coming through? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you can, Graham.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, so Fiona said we did this big list of a lot of indicators there. We did initially have 310, and we managed to, with the working data team, we managed to whittle that down to 110. And then we started collecting data, and we successfully collected data for 73 of those. But as you can see, there's a lot more that we did want to have, particularly around the environmental quality indicators. And we were very, very keen to find more of those for the next iteration. And we can work in partnership, like we have some Yorkshire Water, bringing up some water and sanitation data for the next version. So moving on, we take all these indicators and we plug them into a mathematical model. It's an indexing model, so everything you see from now on is an index score. It's not a percentage. It has gone through quite a lot of transformation, standardization, utopias, dystopias, Z scores, and so on. So you're not seeing a percentage on the screen. So don't be horrified if something's not where you think it might be. It's work on an index score. I shall now just show you the live model. So it goes into this mathematical model and it spits out these visualizations in terms of what we're doing. I'm just going to make this big screen a little bit bigger so you can see them more clearly. And these are the visualizations that we get as part of the social progress imperatives work. This first one is just identifying the framework that we use, i.e. the 3 different dimensions, we call those dimensions, and the 12 different domains. So each of those subheadings there is a domain. And there's 12 of those, and the indicators sit within the domains. So that's the framework. One of the first views that is actually quite useful is called the city view. Just bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to have to refresh that. Okay, and this provides us a tool where we can start to do a little bit of comparison work and a little bit of hotspotting work. So on this left, it's a pretty standard heat map, with the ranking 1 being the best performing, either the best score, 33 being the least best score. And on here, we have each of those 3 main dimensions and each of the 12 components. So for example, if we wanted to look at environmental quality as a heat map across the Leeds area and see where the best ranks are, the outers there we've got whether it be area and so on, in terms of scoring on that. And that's an index score, not a percentage. And if we come across to this side, this is a kind of ward comparison tool where we can choose quite quickly. We can put in a few of these different ones. I'll just select a few that we've used before, and we can see how they compare. So you can see out the outside edge here is the 100 mark. That's the better score. So the further out from the middle you are, the better. And you can see here how Adel and Wharfdale compares to Henley and Hyde Park on the 12 main domains. So things like access to information and communication, Henley and Hyde Park scores particularly well. Adel and Wharfdale scores generally quite well across the board, but in particular on water and sanitation and health and wellness. And environmental quality quite well there. So that's one of the first tools that we can use. The next tool that is particularly useful is this, how the trends change over time. And this applies to all of the different wards. I think the scales here, we've got different colours representing different years, the dark blue being 2020, the taupey green 2018. We can switch those on and off. And again, we've got all the 3 main dimensions and the 12 components here. We'll have a look at environmental quality again. And this shows the trend over time. And if we just want to make that a little bit easier to view, I can just change the setting here. And there, so we've got the score along the bottom here, obviously 100 on the being to the right-hand side, that being the better performing wards for environmental quality based on the indicators we have at the moment. And you can see the changes over time, from example, going from 2018, going higher in 2019, and then dropping back again in 2020. And you can see that that pattern is quite similar across most of the wards here. 1 or 2 have excelled, Henley and Hyde Park going from a standard progression in 18 to 19 and quite a big leap in 2020. Would probably go and explore that a little bit more, and subsequently ones where there's been big drops like Gipton and Hare Hills, where we've looked at a score of 27 in 2018 to 50 in 2019, and it's dropped back again to 32. You would probably want to do a little bit more exploring of that to see what's going on in that area based on the indicators that we've used so far. And again, that's all components, all dimensions. So that's a very useful tool to track the trend over time. Now, as we come to put more data into this in the next iteration, these will still be available. It will be building on them, not excluding them. So we'll have a wider trend and a broader trend over time, and that will be a little bit more indicative, even if we put new indicators in. So that's very useful. Moving on to the next visualization, that's particularly useful. It's something called a scorecard. Don't be horrified by the big dots here, everybody. There's been a little bit of debate over how useful these red dots are, and we are going to have a version with these removed, but I will talk you through them for this particular iteration. We've got here the scorecard for each of the wards. We've got some economic information on there, which is used as a comparison. We've got household income, GVA, relative child poverty, universal credit ratings. It does give an overall rank and it does give an overall score. Again, all the wards are available, so each ward will have a scorecard. And as you can see, we've got the 3 main dimensions with the 12 domains there, but also on this scorecard, you've got the individual indicators, and also some demographic information here at the bottom. We will put the race and ethnicity data in when it is available from the latest census. It's just not quite available yet. Coming very soon to a place near us, so that'll slot in. It's the little legend here tells us about the RAG ratings, where red is underperforming, amber is performing with exceptions, and green is overperforming. And the way this comparison works in terms of performance, it takes a ward and makes wards into little peer groups with similar household income. So for example, Adel and Wharfdale, if we look down here, has similar peer group, i.e. on average people with the same wards with the same average household income as Harewood, Horsforth, Roundhay and Wetherby. So it creates that group of peers and judges how well you're performing against that peer group in terms of household income. So for example, on environmental quality down here, Adel and Wharfdale, it's got a red mark, so it's underperforming against Harewood, Horsforth, Roundhay and Wetherby, which are wards with similar household income. And if we have a look at the indicators overall, it's ranked 16th with a score of 74. It's not particularly doing well in terms of fly tipping against other wards. It's doing quite well. I ranked 8th in terms of noise complaints and ranked very average in terms of pest and vermin control requests, but underperforming against other similar wards. So that scorecard is very, very useful, and it would probably be one of the first go-tos to see exactly what's going on. And the green dots do stand out a mile. You know, the neat numbers in Adel and Wharfdale are very low. It ranks seconds. It's got an index score of 94.8. Water and sanitation, Adel and Wharfdale does very, very good at. It's, you know, it's the best in terms of decent homes provision. It's very, very good at food hygiene areas, and it's very, very good at HMO licenses. So that it builds up a full ward picture. These other visualizations, I'll just show you one of these, and we'll go for foundational well-being. These are just the 3 dimensions broken down a little bit more detail with a heat map on. So this is the foundations of well-being for Adel and Wharfdale, which is ranked 1st in the wards, and it's just got the provision there, each of the indicators just for that dimension. Again, with a heat map here. This time the heat map is all of the different indicators relevant to the foundations of well-being, such as mental health or severe mental health by GP, and you can see which wards are doing particularly well, the lighter ones being the best ranked there, and the economic information to go with that. So that's the tools that the SPI model gives us. A very, very useful conversation starter, very, very useful first port of call in terms of visualization. And if I just come back to my presentation, give me 1 second. What we do from that is we do a little bit of offline analysis on that. This time we've got the ward average, blue being the ward average. When we'd look at that, let's say Temple Newsham, which is probably statistically the most average ward across the whole of the SPI index. As you can see, it maps very, very closely to the ward average. We'd pick up the high points like water and sanitation, where it scores really well, and environmental quality, and we'd probably have a little look at the low points, well, where it doesn't score or underscores against average. And then we'd start to look at those. You'd go to the scorecards, you'd see for Temple Newsham, it's actually doing very well in decent homes and food hygiene and water and sanitation, and doing quite well on noise complaints, not doing so well in shelter and housing affordability, or personal freedom of choice, where it's got quite a poor early years placement score. So again, and then once you'd been to that, we would probably dive into it a little bit more. We'd have a look at that trend, see what's going on. The water and sanitation, for example, we can then see there's been a big increase from 2018 to 2019, but a little drop for 2020. And the deviation from this vertical line here, which is the average, it's got quite a big positive deviation. So doing quite well. Yeah, and they're the ones that are, the green ones are doing quite well. The red ones have dropped, ones with the biggest drops there. So you would do a bit more analysis around each one. Again, shelter is a very, very similar one. Very average in terms of what it's been. We'd look a bit more across the whole dimension and see what the pattern is. Again, housing affordability we picked up before being quite low, decent homes being good, food rating being good. So we can start to build up a picture, a ward profile essentially. And and we do that. I won't go through all these now just for time, but you can get the idea. You build up a bit of a ward picture and see what's performing well, and you'd probably dive into that. Now, the important thing to say about these, the indicators aren't necessarily new to us. The health teams know their indicators. Anything statutory, we've got a lot of data for education, health. They know the data very well, but it's the way it's put together and how the framework pulls it together into those domains essentially. So we can start to talk about things like foundations of well-being, like health and well-being, like what are the opportunities for that ward. And that's the important part about the SPI model. So yeah, we'll just continue on building up. Fiona, do you want to take over again and do any more?
So yeah, I'll just do one or two other things here. So one, just to let you know, sort of the traffic lights are going to be going. So the feedback that we've had from sort of consultations and members that we've had been talking to about this is the way the peer groups are working, and just the traffic lights, it probably isn't helping, and it's maybe a little bit distracting. So we're going to remove those from the visualizations. So don't worry too much about that. Just some of the challenges we've got going forward as well to highlight. Data collection this is something that we found is quite challenging. So sometimes we collect data that's for a particular service or a particular project without necessarily thinking deeply about the wider use, actually, and it's sort of something that we obviously feeding back to sort of to colleagues. Where data is strong, it's obviously linked to statutory requirements. There's something around data ownership as well. So we've taken a lead with some of this, but we want to make sure that services where we get the data from actually are leading around some of this as well, and we want to make sure this is used. So for this, it's it's to enable conversations as well for members and for officers. So to, people know their wards, they know what's happening. This is to kind of give you some additional data and some additional context as well to help with some of this, to have some of those wider conversations. So one example could be housing affordability. If you've got a really high ratio for housing affordability in your area, what does that mean for the conversations you want to have with housing developers who may be wanting to build houses in your areas? It's for things like that. It's to sort of give you more sort of richer data, and the more we can get in here, the better it will actually be as we're going along. So this is our first go. It's going live. We'll do some training on it, but we really want sort of to make sure that the next iteration is even better and that we build on it and build on it going forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing that, Graham. Thank you for that, Fiona. Before we go to any questions, I'm sure you'll all be really keen to analyse it in great depth for your ward, and you will have an opportunity to do that when it goes live. There are also, as Fiona said, other opportunities for you to comment. This isn't going to be your only opportunity. So can we try and keep the discussion focused on the things that Fiona and Graham would like us to look at, which are specifically the environmental indicators. Any comments on the ones that we've seen, and are there other environmental indicators that we think could be included with this as it rolls on? Okay, so we'll go to Councillor Trustwell first.
Two questions, Chair. First one, if we could go back to that list of the indicators that were considered and weren't included, I think that might help to focus the discussion, because I just wanted some clarity on why some of those weren't included when I think we do collect data for them. And the second one was, we're obviously, the index is providing a worldwide average, but we all know that there can be pockets of deprivation, even in Adel and Wharfdale, and I'm just wondering whether the information can be more granular than just ward-wide.
Yeah, I'll answer these ones, Fiona, if that's okay. Yeah, so first of all, in terms of the granularity of it, most of these in the data are available at the moment it has to be minimum available at ward level and below. So out of these 45 initial ones we had, only 27 of these are available below that level, i.e. at LSOA level or postcode level. For the sensitive ones, there are some issues in terms of what we release in terms of postcode level data, particularly when we're looking at domestic abuse and so on. So there's out of those 27, another 5 we probably wouldn't be able to release, so it takes it down to 22. Initially, out of the 73, we were hoping we'd get at least 45 or 50 that were available at LSOA or postcode level, which would give us a fair chance at running a SPI index at that level at that point. At the moment, we're pretty stuck on 27. As we get more information and more data from more sources, hopefully there will be an opportunity to do a little bit more, a deeper model in terms of granularity. The process is exactly the same. It would just be a lot more data on the processing end, but the model works exactly the same. So it is physically possible. It's the political will to do so.
And just to say as well, Graham, I just wanted to come back on that. Don't forget, we've also got the index of multiple deprivation that does dig into some of this as well. But at the minute, it's just, you know, the granularity isn't there for enough of the indicators to make it work right now.
Yeah. And the other question related to the quality of the indicators, which ones we couldn't put in that we wanted to. Again, it's that ward level availability over a period of 3 years. For example, the best one that I can give there is the yearly trees planted. We only started tracking what trees we were planting by ward at the sort of later part of 2019. So that has not given us enough time running. Next iteration, we could probably include it because we've got at least 2 years full data and a little bit more then. So that will be included the next one. Another one, which I can't actually believe that we haven't done track, is electrical charging infrastructure. No one can tell me from the planning department where and when electrical installation infrastructure went in. It's not collated, it's not anywhere in the council. So that would have to be a data collection program essentially started, i.e. yesteryear, to be able to put this into the next iteration. So I think it's a lot of it's about education, a lot of it's about a persuasion position to say we need to start collecting this information now. Things like the air pollutants concentration, whether it be 2.5 or 10, you know, it's collected project by project in the council on a pitot by pitot tube basis, basic whatever works are going on in that area, and then it's moved. So there's no regular measure of the air quality that we want per ward that we could include in this. So it's an open call in many ways. If anyone is aware of more indicators we can include that we have for 3, 4, 5 years at a ward or can be aggregated to or from ward level, that would be amazing. I would love to include them in the next iteration.
Thank you. I think Polly wants to come in on that.
You know me too well. Yeah, I think it's probably just worth clarifying on 2 of the things. Actually, on the air quality, we collect a lot of air quality data across the whole city, but fundamentally, you know, I could collect it in one street. It's not representative of a ward, so actually it's really difficult to have a ward measure that's representative. And we publish an annual report on air quality that sets out where it is. So it's not through lack of collection, it's really the methodology of it just wouldn't really represent, so it could end up being quite misleading. And just picking up, sorry Graham, on your electric vehicle charge point comment, the real challenge around that is actually there's so many different sources putting charging in. So there's obviously what comes through planning, but actually there's a lot that wouldn't go through planning. So it would literally be a manual exercise. So there are things like ZapMap and things like that have it. So yeah, it's having the sort of need to collect it. But sometimes the source of data isn't always coming from one place either. So just to clarify, I think, can I just say one other thing which isn't related to what we just said? I think we've got the environmental quality, but actually if you look under shelter as well, there's obviously the bit about fuel poverty and about the sustainability of housing, which obviously do still fall into what I would consider sort of the sustainability type agenda. So because I think if you just look at the environmental quality bit, it feels a bit limited, but actually that housing sustainability is obviously quite significant for us as well.
Thank you. And did you want to come back on any of those, Councillor Trustwell?
No, that's fine. Time's moving on.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson.
I mean, actually, Graham's actually said one of the things I was going to say is over time, I think we'll get better quality of data because we'll be collecting it better. Because at the moment, you go to some council departments and you ask a specific question and they don't even collect the data themselves. So but anyway, my more important point is, right, this is going to highlight areas where funding should be, either funding or resources generally should be targeted. Are your colleagues, the other council officers, ready to actually to respond to your data that you're going to be delivering to them? Or are we going to have to go through an exercise like we're doing on climate change, where you've got some departments that are taking it and running with it straight away, no questions asked. And you've got other council departments that would wish that it didn't exist because they just don't want to face up to the impact it's going to have on them. Where are you on this scale with your colleague officers?
So if I come in on this, look, colleagues have been made are aware of this data. It's just another sort of set of measurements around that. How people, it's up to sort of the council as a whole to choose how this gets used and if this is something that then informs those decisions. So it's not for us to tell people what it is. We're putting that out there. I know where you're coming from on this, but you know, we're putting that out there, and it's for people to then decide how they use it as well.
But at the moment, the directors and the chief officers, I'm not asking you to name names, but have all the directors and all the chief officers bought into this so far?
So we have put this together as a way of understanding inclusive growth. It's heavily referenced in sort of the Best City Ambition, and you know, and through that. But in terms of an approach of saying you use this as a way of directing resources, no, that we've not explicitly asked that question. It's been shared with, obviously, with LMT. It's been shared through various scrutiny boards. It's been shared across, you know, within there. But in terms of everybody agreeing that that's not what's there. It can be used like that, but that's a decision for acceptable. Yeah.
And just carrying on that, Fiona, just carrying on from that, my thoughts and hopes would be that as we enrich the indicators that we put in here, i.e. create more better ones, it does two things. One, it strengthens that arm of persuasion. You know, if, let's say at the moment we've only got 3 or 4 environmental quality indicators in there. If we had a good robust set of 10 over a long period of time, it's a much more persuasive tool. And secondly, by having more indicators over a longer period of time, it balances out the discrepancies between wards and neighbourhoods, because certain indicators will attach themselves to neighbourhood levels, certain indicators will attach them to other neighbourhood levels within that ward, and it'll balance the differential out. So I think that those two developments, as we do this more iterative over the next few years, that should hopefully be more persuasive in its ways and have a bit more credence to what it's showing.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. And anybody else got any questions for Fiona or Graham? Okay, can I just thank you then for coming along. It has the potential, as you've said, to be a really, really powerful tool, but I think the key is going to be what it's used for ultimately. And it is very encouraging when I read the linked document that shared some of the work that came out of it in Barking and Dagenham, that they seem to have made really good use of it. And I think one of the things that came out of it was a green energy plan or something, if I remember rightly. So, you know, I think if it's a start, then I think it has the potential to definitely make a difference. So thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
I do believe that takes us to the end of our meeting. Can I just raise an AOB, please, before we finish? I do hope that you're all aware of the amazing A rating that we got from the CDP. I think it was reported on last week. So can we, as a group, just say a huge thank you, particularly to Polly and your team, Polly, for all the work that went into getting that. I think it's hugely important. It is something that we're going to be analysing in more depth in the working groups. So when we look at the feedback, you know, what kind of things have they fed back to us, and are there things that we can carry on doing to make improvements? But at this initial stage, a huge thank you. I think it's really brilliant work, so thank you, Polly. Councillor Tudor, was your hand up for a comment or a question?
Yeah, really enjoyed today's meeting. I'll just say, you know, with this being a public meeting and recorded, it's the same as with our group meetings that we have with the Labour Party, that people having their cameras on really is very beneficial to everybody watching, to the members, the officers, to the public. You know, in 2 hours meeting, at one point there were 6 out of 12 councillors with their camera off. One councillor's had their camera off for 2 hours. And I think it's really important that we are visibly present in these meetings. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, actually. Thank you for making it, Councillor Tudor. Appreciate that. Okay, so I hope you're also aware that we have an extra meeting that we've had to put in specifically to look at the SEAC annual report. It's going to be on the 12th of December at 2 o'clock. We were really struggling to find a slot, but we need to get it in because we have to discuss that report and it'll be the only agenda item. So I do hope that you can all make it on that date. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Chair.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.